I never expected to hear her words. A life-changing encounter with a black girl's heartfelt plea. I will never forget the day everything fell apart. A typical Tuesday morning, the sun already baking the pavement beneath my feet. Little did I know, a single encounter would turn my world upside down. The air was thick with an unshakable tension. I felt it, a shiver creeping down my spine as I walked past the small park on Maple Street. Her voice, so soft yet powerful, cut through the morning chatter like a knife. "Help me, please." I turned, startled. There, beneath the twisted branches of an old oak tree, stood a girl, her skin a radiant shade of deep mahogany, glistening like polished wood in the sunlight. Her wide, watery eyes were pools of sorrow, entangled with fear. I should have walked away. But my feet wouldn't move. Why do you need help?" My voice trembled, clumsy with uncertainty. The world faded as she took a step closer, her small hands shaking, her breath hitching in a way that made my heart race. "Because they don't see me," she whispered, her voice breaking. "I'm invisible, and if nobody helps me, I might disappear forever." The weight of her words sank deep into my chest. I felt the lump forming in my throat, a punch of raw emotion. Those words so simple, yet tinged with an urgency that set my mind racing. That I looked around. People bustled past, lost in their phones, their conversations, their own worlds. No one noticed her pain. No one heard her silent plea. I wanted to scream, to shake them awake, but instead, I was frozen in place, rooted to the ground. "What do you mean?" I whispered back, desperate for answers. She glanced around as if expecting someone to jump out from behind a tree, a gnawing worry etched into her features. "The others, they don't care. They don't understand. But I have to show them." Her voice was barely a breath now, rasping but sharp. She looked me directly in the eyes. "Will you help me make them see?" My heart pounded against my ribs as I searched her gaze. It drew me in like a magnet. She was young, yet I sensed a depth to her I could hardly fathom. A silent storm bubbled within her. But could I really help? I had no idea where this was leading, and I trembled at the thought. I don't know how," I stuttered, a storm of emotions brewing in my chest. Oh, to rip through the veil of ignorance that draped around us, to pull back the curtain and reveal the truth. Could I be brave enough? Before I could respond, she stepped closer, her trembling hands drawing together, as though weaving a fragile spell. "Listen," she said, her words like wine through a forest, soft yet laden with power. "It starts with us." I felt the world tilt on its axis. A siren wailed in the distance. I could feel my heart racing, a pulse of adrenaline surging through me. Could I trust her? What did she want from me? Then the unexpected happened. A group of kids appeared on scooters, laughing, their voices echoing through the park. They veered toward us, glancing over with wide eyes. I held my breath, the tension building, wondering if they'd notice her, hear her plea, or if they would only see another stranger. No. She cried, fear painting her features. It hit me like a freight train. The urgency in her voice tugged at something deep within. She was terrified they'd miss her, ignore her. Suddenly, the sun felt far too bright. Could anyone understand? Her moment screamed urgent, and it was all slipping through my fingers. "Please," she whispered, desperation threading through her voice. But before I could respond, the ground trembled as a caustic force burst forth, an overwhelming silence that hung heavy like smoke in the air. What was happening? As I looked into her eyes, the shadow of the fear, the depth of her soul, realized I was staring at hope, trembling and raw. But could hope alone defy the odds? I wanted to find out, yet doubt clawed at my heart. Then silence fell, and the world around us faded away, her plea echoed in my ears. I didn't know what I would do next, but I had to know her story, and I was terrified it might change everything. Hey. Before we continue with this amazing story, I need to give you an important heads up. Many subscribers have reported that YouTube unsubscribed them without warning. Take a quick second to check the red button below to make sure you're still subscribed to the channel. I'd hate for you to miss any of the exclusive content coming soon. And while you're there, smash that like button, it really helps me out with the algorithm. Oh, and tell me in the comments, which city are you watching from? I love getting to know every amazing person who's part of this community. Your participation makes all the difference. Let's connect. The sun hung heavy in the sky, casting elongated shadows, the warmth intertwining with an unsettling chill in the air. As the laughter of the passing children faded into the distance, I felt an ache settle deep in my chest, pulling at the edges of my resolve. What had I gotten myself into? The girl's words nagged at me, "It starts with us." But how? I had seen her pain, her urgency, and somehow within that small, fragile frame lay a connection, a spark of something that felt both terrifying and electrifying. Yet my own insecurities flared up like an inferno. What could I, just a regular person, do to make anyone see here the multitude of stories unfolding quietly in corners unseen? I can't promise anything, I said, my voice cracking. I needed her to understand that I, too, felt trapped in a world that seemed indifferent, roiling with the weight of expectations and fears. But am willing to try, then well, start small, she whispered, her eyes glimmering with a mix of hope and uncertainty. Every voice has a platform, no matter how small. A lingering silence enveloped us, interrupted only by the rustle of leaves in the breeze. I could feel myself uncoiling, buoyed by her determination, yet the knot of anxiety remained, painfully tight. Tell me your name, I urged, inhaling deeply as if breathing in the courage she exuded. Simi, she replied, her voice lightening, her name wrapping around us in a soft embrace. Simi means to hear in my language. I want people to hear me, to see me. The vulnerability radiating from her filled the air, and my heart twisted at the enormity of her desire. I hear you, I said, not quite knowing if it was enough. What do we do first? Simi's eyes brightened with determination. We stand together, find a way to amplify our voices. As she spoke, I glimpsed a flicker of hope, a thread of possibility knitting into my mind. I remembered the community board at the local cafe, where events and stories were shared. They had occasionally hosted forums to discuss social issues. Perhaps we could convince them to hold a special event dedicated to the theme of visibility? It was a step, albeit a small one. Let's go to the cafe, I suggested, my voice trembling with a sudden, overwhelming rush of excitement. I think I might have an idea, Simi nodded, her smile widening. Together, we walked towards the heart of the community, a place bustling with life, laughter, and chatter. The weather had turned, and clouds rolled in, wrapping the day in a gloomy shroud. Yet, as we neared the cafe, Simi's spirit shone brighter than the fading day. Inside, the familiar aroma of roasted coffee beans wafted toward us, wrapping around us like a warm hug. I could see the usual clientele, moms with kids, students deep into their notes, elderly couples sharing secrets over sticky pastries. But they were absorbed in their own worlds, oblivious to the quiet storm brewing outside their windows. With hesitant steps, I approached the barista, a bright-eyed student who often flashed a smile that warmed the room. Hey, Anne? I began, uncertain. Can we talk? Of course. She replied cheerfully. What's up? She glanced between Simi and me, her smile faltering just a second as she took in the seriousness on our faces. That we want to propose an event, I started, trying to find the words. An open forum to talk about visibility, about stories that people need to hear. Visibility? And echoed, her brow furrowing slightly as she leaned against the counter. The bustling cafe seemed to fade into an even quieter background, creating a cocoon around our conversation. Yes, Simi piped in, her voice steady now, filling the space with her presence. It's important. I want to share my story, and I want others to share theirs too. People are invisible, and look thoughtful, glancing around as if weighing what we proposed against the usual Sunday charm of the cafe. I felt a pulse of anxiety in my chest again, as though we were dangling on the edge of a cliff, uncertain of how far the leap would drop us. Let's make a flyer, I suggested, feeling momentum build inside me. We could start there, see who is interested, and hesitated for a moment before her eyes began to sparkle with recognition, as if she had seen a flicker of the potential we saw in each other. Okay, she said slowly, but if we do this, it's going to take courage from everyone involved. Community talks can get passionate. I nodded, a lump rising in my throat. Yes, but it's essential. As we brainstormed, an unexpected warmth spread in my chest. Despite my fears, I felt an unfamiliar camaraderie growing by the moment. I glanced at Simi, her eyes dancing with hope, and I wondered if perhaps we were finally untangling a thread in the tapestry of our lives, but just as possibilities began to bloom, a loud crash shattered the air. A group of rowdy teenagers burst in, disrupting the tranquility. Laughter turned to a disordered frenzy, knocking over a table in their wake. I watched in dismay as they sprinted through the cafe, wild and careless, completely oblivious to the quiet moments that had just taken root among coffee cups and whispers. Simi's expression turned from hope to a sudden darkness, her hands curling into fists as she glared at the chaos. I sensed the panic building within her, a reflection of the struggle to be seen amidst the whirlwind of noise. Let's go, she said abruptly, her whisper harsh, her earlier confidence crumbling. My heart sank, feeling the tension shift like the tide dragging sand from beneath my feet. What do you mean? I asked, reaching for her arm, but she recoiled, her gaze drifting somewhere beyond the chaos, her thoughts a battleground. This is just a bump. No, she murmured, her voice a quiver. It's never just a bump. They'll never understand. It struck me hard, a brutal reminder of the harsh reality she faced each day. How would we make them see when the system felt rigged against those who were already invisible? For the first time, I was worried that I may have opened a door in her heart only to have the world crash down, cementing her fears deeper. Stepping outside, the cool air nipped at my skin, and as Simi walked away, I felt my heart fracture with each step she took. And just as I reached for her shoulder, desperate to pull her back, I noticed something. The flyer we had begun drafting had slipped from my pocket, fluttering to the ground. The wind caught it, lifting it high as Simi turned back one last time. I watched helplessly as the words "visibility matters, share your story" disappeared into the distance, leaving only silence in the wake of our hesitant hope. The skies darkened as we stepped away from the cafe, the wind whisking my breath away with an urgency that mirrored my heart. The laughter from the cafe faded behind us, replaced by the distant rumble of thunder, a fitting backdrop for the storm raging within Simi. I reached out again, hoping to bridge the growing chasm. "Simi, wait!" I called, my voice breaking against the weight of her anguish. She paused but didn't turn. I stepped closer, urgency pushing my words forward. "Please, talk to me." Slowly, she turned, but her eyes were distant, clouded with a mix of indignation and despair. "What's there to say? They don't care. They never care." The words erupted from her like shattered glass, slicing through the thickening air between us. I took a step backwards, absorbing the weight of her pain. "But we have to try. We can't give up now. Not after everything we've talked about." My heart raced as I fought against her retreat, not just for her sake but for mine. Deep down, I felt it too, the overwhelming despair that swelled from an endless cycle of apathy. I wish it were that simple. She looked down, her fists still frozen at her sides. "You don't know what it's like to be invisible, to scream while everyone else pretends not to hear." Her vulnerability hit me squarely in the chest. It felt unjust that I could stand beside her feeling determination while she grappled with the shadows of her existence. "I want to help you be seen," I pleaded, inching closer again. "We can be their voice together. Remember this morning, in that moment? You were brilliant." "It's not too late." Simi drew a deep breath, but the light in her eyes dimmed further, swallowed by a darkness that threatened to envelop her. "You don't know what you're asking me to do. I'm tired of fighting. Tired of being brave. I just wanted to be heard for once, to matter for once." I opened my mouth to respond but was silenced by a wave of understanding. The truth in her words cut deeper than I could articulate. How many times had I found myself hiding behind my own vulnerabilities, afraid of letting others in because I feared being shouted down, ignored, or, worse yet, disregarded. "It's okay to be tired, Simi," I finally whispered, my voice softening. "But I believe we can find strength together. You don't have to shoulder the burden of being brave alone." She looked at me then, surprise flickering amid her anguish. "Together?" "Yes." I extended my hand between us, as much a gesture of solidarity as it was a lifeline. "Let's start this journey. You don't have to face this alone anymore. Whatever happens, I'll be right here beside you." For a moment, we stood in silence, neither of us moving, the storm overhead rumbling restlessly. And then, inch by inch, she stepped towards me, finally closing the distance. Gently, she grasped my hand. Her palm was cold, but I felt a spark of warmth rushing between us. Just then, lightning split the sky, illuminating her face, a picture of vulnerability, strength, and a sliver of possibility. "Okay," she murmured, her grip tightening. "Let's try." I wanted to cheer, but before I could say another word, bright spots flickered across the edge of my vision. A crowd was gathering across the street, its collective chatter drawing our attention. Figures in the distance were peering into an abuzz park, children shrieking with laughter, adults already returning to normalcy, but there, at the heart of that crowd, I spotted a man on a soapbox. His voice carried across the crisp air, igniting sparks of fervor and anticipation, captivated listeners hanging on each word as if he held answers to the universe. "My friends. Today, we must stand united. We cannot allow ourselves to be silenced any longer." There it was, the spark of hope again, a kindling igniting within me. Perhaps this was exactly what we needed, a chance to echo our call for visibility amidst others who felt invisible too. "Simi, look." I directed her attention, my pulse quickening with the sudden electricity of possibility. "Maybe he can help." As Simi's gaze locked onto the figure in the park, I could see something shift. Within her, a small flame flickering back to life. "Are you sure we can approach him?" she asked, the hint of a smile teasing the corners of her mouth. "This could be it. Let's go." The wind whistled encouragement through the branches, urging us forward as we raced towards the gathering crowd, hand in hand, our earlier fears distancing into mere echoes behind us. But just as we navigated closer, weaving through the throng, the man's voice faltered, and an unfamiliar commotion erupted from his side. Gasps were heard, glances darted toward a cluster of figures nearby, their faces contorting into alarm. Suddenly, a shriek tore through the air, piercing the moment like a thunderclap. My heart dropped. What happened? Before I could process more, the world jolted as someone broke through the crowd, rushing past us in a flurry of chaos. Distant cries were mixed with frenzied shouts. In our wake, someone called out, "He's hurting her." As we turned just in time, I saw a familiar figure in the chaos, a frightened girl tangled in a struggle, a reflection of Simi's own plight. My stomach twisted, realization crashing into me like a wave. Simi stepped forward instinctively, her resolve reigniting, but I gripped her wrist. "Wait. It's too dangerous," but she looked at me, her eyes resolute with a fire I hadn't seen before. "No. I can't just stand by." And just like that, before I could understand what was happening, Simi broke free from my hold, charging into the fray as thunder rolled overhead. In that single heartbeat, my world tilted precariously, caught between trying to hold her back yet knowing I couldn't tether the fierce spirit blooming within her. Lightning cracked again, illuminating the urgency of the moment, and I was left standing there, breathless, helpless as she collided into the storm, a force of nature undeterred by fear or invisibility. I stood frozen in the crowd, feeling the thunder of my heart drown out the chaos around me. Simi had vanished into the turmoil, a small figure charging headfirst into conflict while I hesitated, paralyzed by fear and a hollowness that grew with every moment. The tension in the air buzzed with urgency as I scanned the crowd, searching for any sign of her. Screams erupted, jarring me back to reality. People were moving, trying to intervene, but the scene was unraveling faster than I could process. The shouts were a symphony of panic that echoed inside my head, drowning out the burgeoning doubt that clawed at me. She was so brave, yet I felt the weight of my cowardice gritting my teeth. I forced myself to move. "Simi!" I shouted, but my voice was swallowed in the cacophony. I pushed past the sea of bodies, the chaos tightening its grip around me as adrenaline coursed through my veins. Each step felt like wading through molasses, heavy and slow, but there was no turning back that I finally broke through to the inner circle, where a man loomed over Simi. His expression was a mix of anger and desperation, and my chest tightened at the sight. Simi stood defiantly before him, her hands clasped at her sides, trembling but unwavering. I recognized that look, the raw determination that flared up when faced with injustice. The crowd pulsed around me, energy crackling like electricity, their anxious murmurs amplifying my fear. I could see it in Simi's eyes, the way they glistened with intensity and passion, yet the tremor of uncertainty lingered beneath. "Please, let her go," she pleaded, her voice rising above the noise, stronger than I had ever heard it. "Who do you think you are?" The man barked, his voice hard as steel. I peered closer. This was not just an altercation. There was something deeper, something so wrong in the air that I could feel it, an unnameable weight. "Someone who won't let you hurt her." Simi shot back, her resolve evident, emotions swirling in her eyes. I saw the flicker of fear merge with righteousness, a tempest ignited within her, pushing her forward like a beacon that I couldn't hold back any longer. "Simi!" I yelled again, desperate, my voice cutting through the haze as I pushed my way to her side. In that moment, our eyes met, and I felt like I could dive into her heart, tethered by an invisible thread that tightened with each heartbeat. The man turned toward me, a sneer curling his lips. "You're both fools to think you can stand against me. Stop!" I shouted, urgency wrapping around my words. I could feel the way Simi tapped into courage, drawing strength from the solidarity we had established just moments before, but I didn't want her to face this alone. "What do you think you're doing?" But Simi didn't flinch, instead leaning into the moment. "You don't get to treat her like this. You don't get to make anyone feel invisible." The desperation rising in her voice ignited something in me. I stepped closer, anger simmering just beneath the surface, a fearsome fusion of protection and defiance. "We have a voice. And we won't be silenced." The air thickened, tension like a pulled bowstring, and in an instant, the man shifted toward me, anger flaring in his gaze. "You think you're brave? You think this is anything other than a waste of time?" The crowd had grown quieter, watching with bated breath, hearts pounding like a drum. Even the distant rumbles of thunder seemed to hush, the world narrowing down to our small group. "Bravery isn't about being unafraid." Simi's voice shook, her passion bubbling like molten lava. "It's about speaking up, about taking a stand even when it feels impossible." "You're all so naive," the man shot back, stepping closer, raising his voice as the fear in Simi's eyes sparkled with the kind of righteous fire that could spark a revolution, but he seemed impervious to it, hardness advancing like darkness pushing across the sky. I watched Simi as she drew a deep breath, fear coiling in her but overshadowed by determination. Before I could even reach out to comfort her, she took a step forward, defiance etched into every line of her face. "You don't get to dictate my worth. You don't get to decide if I matter." It was as if the storm overhead echoed our turmoil, resonating with the struggle for visibility. I felt the ripple of her courage wash over me, igniting my own resolve, even as dread threaded through my veins. But just then, a coarse shout erupted from the back of the crowd, catching the attention of every pair of eyes. "Well then, let's see how brave you really are." My stomach twisted as I turned to see a group of figures weaving through the crowd, their intentions uncertain. Fear trickled down my spine. Were they here to escalate the situation? To provoke? Simi's gaze darted toward me, a flicker of uncertainty crossing her passionate resolve, but I squeezed my hands together, drawing on every ounce of strength I had left. "No matter what happens, Simi, you're not alone," I called out, my voice fighting against the rising tide of chaos. Yet in that moment, I couldn't shake the sudden ominous feeling deep in my gut, the sense that this was just the brink of something darker and more dangerous. My heart sank as the new group closed in, their intentions obscured by the growing storm within the air both inside the crowd and outside in the skies above. The electricity in the air buzzed, charged with both fear and hope, and I plunged headlong into the uncertainty, aware now that it was not just Simi's fate hanging in the balance but perhaps something much larger, something that could change our lives in ways we never anticipated. Then, in a shocking twist, the figure leading the new group pulled out a megaphone, raising it high above her head, and I felt that stirring of dread escalate into a chilling realization. "Hold on to your words, because we will make sure you're heard," she proclaimed, looking directly at Simi and me, her eyes gleaming with a wild fervor that left my heart racing. In that instant, I understood, we were all standing on the precipice of a reckoning, one that could echo long after the storm had passed. And as the ambiguity of our fate hung like an ominous cloud overhead, I knew one thing for certain. This wasn't over, not by a long shot. As the woman's voice reverberated through the air, a hush fell over the crowd, the tension palpable. All eyes were on us, drawing tighter around Simi and me like an invisible noose. The latent fear melded with a flicker of hope. Something was shifting, but in which direction? Simi stood firm, her body a statue of resolve, yet I could see the flicker in her eyes, a mixture of confusion and anticipation. I felt my heart thumping in rhythm with the pulse of the crowd, a collective heartbeat. "What does she mean?" I whispered to Simi, barely able to mask the concern in my voice. But Simi's gaze remained locked on the woman with the megaphone, her breath steadying, as if she were drawing on an unseen power. "I think she's going to give us a chance to speak," Simi murmured back, the fire in her voice dancing with trepidation. The leader of the newcomers, a tall figure adorned with bright colors that seemed to radiate defiance, lowered the megaphone and stepped forward, her presence commanding even against the storm brewing overhead. She raised her hands, palms outward, and the crowd followed her cue, the restless murmurs fading into an unexpected silence. "Today," she began, her voice ringing with clarity, "we confront the truths that have been silenced. Today, we amplify the voices that have always mattered, but were never heard." She turned her piercing gaze toward Simi, who stood resolute beside me. "You," she said, her tone softening slightly but still charged, "speak your truth." Simi's eyes widened, caught off guard by the request. I looked at her, feeling the swell of something profound between USA's shared understanding, the weight of unvoiced fears coiling around our hearts. "You got this," I whispered fiercely, squeezing her hand. With a deep breath, Simi stepped away from me, inching toward the makeshift stage the woman had created amidst the chaos. The crowd parting like the Red Sea, giving her space to breathe, the air thick with anticipation. Her voice wavered as she began, uncertainty underlying her words. I never thought I could be the one to stand up like this," she admitted, vulnerability etched across her face. "But I can't just stand by anymore while others are hurting." The crowd swayed like leaves in the wind, each member hanging on to her words, entwined in a web of shared hopes and fears. I watched as she navigated through the mix of courage and doubt, her voice gaining strength with each syllable. "For too long, so many of us have felt invisible, unacceptable, or unworthy. But we are worthy. We matter. And we deserve to be heard." Cheers erupted from sections of the crowd, igniting a warmth within me, a feeling I had not fully grasped until that moment. Hope. But even within that flicker burned an underlying dread. Who would come after Simi's plea? What would this day mean for us, really? As I stood frozen in place, wrestling with my own fears, another figure seemed to emerge from the shadows, someone who had been cloaked in the chaos, now stepping toward the light. It was the man who had confronted Simi earlier, his eyes alight with an unsettling mix of anger and something else, fear, perhaps? The crowd's energy shifted, drawn toward the tension he radiated, an air of danger riding on his presence. "What are you doing?" he spat, his face contorted in rage. "You think you can change anything? You think your cries make any difference?" The crowd gasped collectively, and I could feel the tension ripple through us like a charge in the atmosphere. It was as if the moment stilled, waiting for Simi's next move, her gaze locked on the man now advancing towards her like a storm in a bottle about to burst. "Your anger doesn't scare me," Simi said defiantly, the tremor in her voice now replaced with unwavering resolve. "We won't be silenced anymore." But as I watched her stand tall, bolstered by an unyielding spirit, I felt a brutal wave of dread. What if this only escalated? What if they turned their rage toward her? Fools! The man shouted, his arms flailing dramatically as if trying to capture the attention of the crowd. "You're just playing with fire. The repercussions will be a lot more dangerous than you realize." And just like that, the shards of hope coalesced with a growing darkness, sending chills racing down my spine. I clenched my hands, feeling powerless against the tide swelling around us. What had begun as a movement for visibility was rapidly morphing into a warning of possible chaos, one that could engulf us all. Before I could voice my concerns, the leader's voice rang out again, a clarion call cutting through the confusion. "We will not back down. Not to fear, not to threats. This is our moment." Then came a dreadful realization, a chilling epiphany that flickered in the back of my mind. The storm was not just approaching from above but was rising within the crowd, the unease, the simmering anger, the hearts ready to fight or flee, and then, as if signaled by the electric atmosphere, lightning lit up the sky, an ominous flash that illuminated every face in the crowd, every doubt, every tear that had fallen in silence, every heart that yearned to be brave. In that moment of clarity, I knew this was only the beginning of something monumental, but I couldn't shake the growing dread that it could become a confrontation we weren't prepared for. What awaited us on the other side of this reckoning? As the storm rumbled in the distance, something deep within me shifted. I took a step forward, compelled by an urgency that rushed through me like wildfire. There was still so much left unsaid, so much to fight for, and I couldn't let fear dictate our fate. Just as I was ready to join Simi on that stage, a loud crash of thunder broke the sky, an exclamation mark to the chaos unfurling before us. It loomed like a dark question mark over our confrontation, threatening to shatter our united front. And in that moment, I understood one thing clearly: the battle for our voices had just begun, but the road ahead was guaranteed to be fraught with peril. The world around me blurred, with only Simi's fierce determination anchoring me to the moment. Her presence ignited a resonance in the crowd, but the tension coiling around us was like a tightly wound string, threatening to snap. That thunder didn't just indicate a shift in the weather, it echoed the heartbeat of restless souls ready to either rise or fall. As Simi continued to speak, I felt the fear settle in my stomach like a heavy stone. The man confronting her had cast a shadow, one that crept across the crowd, whispering of division and discontent. I could see the anger seeping into the eyes of those who had been transformed from passive to volatile, igniting the flames of conflict with each word exchanged. "Listen," Simi said, fighting to maintain control of the stage her heart had created, her voice unwavering among the roar of undermining shouts. "We are here because we matter. No weapon formed against us can prosper when we stand together." The crowd responded, some cheering, others caught between submission and outrage, but her words cracked the surface of despair, urging unification even in the face of adversity. Yet, standing on the outskirts of this gathering storm was that man, clenching his fists, as if battling against an unseen monster. Fear slipped between us like an unwelcome echo. The leader, sensing the rising tempers, took a step back, a shadow gracing her sharp features. "We're all here for a reason," she called, seeking to calm the turbulence, to be heard, to be seen. "We must not let anger drive us apart, we're stronger united." But the man, emboldened by a mix of embers and bitterness, screamed back, "You want to be strong? You want to be united? Then let's face it, no one here knows the price we've paid. You think shouting will change anything? You're just puppets dancing on broken strings." His words struck a chord, setting a palpable tension that filled the air. I could feel my pulse quickening with each breath, the enormity of the moment smashing against my chest. What if he was right? What if our cries for change led us into deeper chaos? Simi, however, bore down harder, rekindling that ember of hope. "We've all faced pain together, we can confront it. Together we will demand respect. The energy in her voice resonated, reaching into the very core of those who listened. But beneath her bravery, I felt a crack in uncertainty she could no longer mask. The storm inside her mirrored the brewing tempest above, and just then, a little girl, barely 7, stepped from the crowd, holding a flimsy paper sign that read "We all matter," in faded, clumsy letters. Her innocence radiated through the darker tones, casting bright colors amidst the swirling storm of emotions. The crowd parted for her, just as they had for Simi. "Well, if we all matter," the girl said, her voice small but undeniably clear, "then we should listen to each other, right?" A hush fell, the word striking a gentle chord within the hardened hearts surrounding us. For that moment, her innocence bathed the angst in light, drawing gasps of both surprise and gentle laughter from the crowd. But before the mood could settle into the soft glow of connection, the man took a step forward, eyes narrowed, drowning out her light with darkness. "And what do you know about it, child?" His sneer was sharp, dismissing her plea, ready to extinguish the flicker of hope that I felt Simi stiffen at her side, her resolve darkening, paced breaths mingling with the rising cacophony around us. "Don't you dare speak to her that way." Simi's voice rang out, filled with a protective fierceness. The man scoffed, "Why? Because she hasn't seen the world yet?" Young and naive just like all of you, hope collided with bitterness, and everything pinched with an uncertainty that screamed we were at the precipice of something flexible but precarious. I took a shaky breath, instinctively stepping closer to Simi, holding on to the belief that our courage could carry us through. But in that moment, amid the chaos, a flash of lightning split the sky, illuminating the crowd in stark revelation. As shadows fled and faces became visible, I glanced towards the leader, her expression flickering between authority and alarm. She turned to the woman behind her, their eyes locked, sharing a silent conversation that felt heavy with implication. Before I could decipher the meaning, a loud gasp erupted amongst the crowd. The woman in authority had stepped backward, eyes widening in dread, almost as if an unseen shroud had been pulled away, revealing a sinister truth. The energy shifted again, unsettling, shattering that illusion of unity we had forged. As the realization hit, the crowd swayed like a field of grass caught in a storm, whispers growing frantic. "What is she hiding? What else is there?" I quelled the pulse of fear that surged through my veins, turning to Simi, her face caught in a mixture of confusion and concern. The undeniable and haunting thought reverberated in my mind: perhaps the turmoil wasn't just coming from the outside, but rooted deeply within our enmeshed stories, a darkness we were yet to acknowledge. "What's happening?" I asked her, anxiety gnawing at me. But the question hung in the air, unanswered as our paths unveiled themselves into even murkier depths. With a resolve I didn't know I possessed, I turned toward the crowd, feeling the charge of emotion swirl around us, the electricity of fear, anger, hope all battling for dominance. Today was not an end, it was a gateway to something larger than any of us could fathom. And as the storm continued to roll around us, I knew one thing for sure: whatever we were about to face, we weren't just fighting for our voices. We were fighting for our very identities, and the storm would reveal what lay beneath the surface, whether we were ready or not. As the murmur of anxiety rippled through the crowd, I felt my heart quicken with the urgency of their unspoken questions. The light had fled from the momentary peace that little girl's voice had ignited, leaving us suffocated by the weight of the unknown. Simi's hand gripped mine tightly, a lifeline that calmed the storm brewing inside me. Something about that leader's frozen gaze haunted me. She knew something that could either bring us together or shred us apart. Her demeanor, once confident, now bore the heaviness of a looming crisis, an echo of fears yet to be spoken. The man who had challenged Simi loomed nearer, a storm front of bitterness trailing behind him, and another piece of my resolve wavered. "Whatever happens," I whispered to Simi, "we can't let these shadows consume us." She nodded, but her sharp intake of breath reminded me that we were still standing on the edge of something precarious. The crowd was alive with tension, each person carrying their own story, their own wounds. There was anger, yes, and a longing to be heard, but there was also something deeper, a need to heal, to understand. Without warning, a figure emerged from the back of the crowd, a tall, solemn woman, her face framed by a cascade of silver hair. A hush fell as she moved toward the forefront, catching everyone's attention like a moth drawn to flame. The very air around us seemed to still, her approach igniting both curiosity and caution. "That I come to you not as a leader but as someone who has walked these roads before," she began, her voice smooth yet laced with gravity. "I've tasted the bitterness of loss and carried the weight of despair. There were days I couldn't see a future worth fighting for. My breath hitched as her vulnerability washed over the gathered throng. "Would this moment break us or bind us in shared understanding? But," she continued, "it is precisely the journey through darkness that grants us the strength to rise. We are not alone in this struggle, no matter how isolated we feel." As she spoke, I saw heads nodding, spirits lifting slightly, yet the restlessness of the man remained, a festering wound that refused to heal. I glanced up at Simi, who was visibly shifted by the woman's words. Maybe there lay an opportunity to free ourselves from the grip of the shadows cast by fury. "Tell us, then," the man spat, breaking the brief hush, his voice slicing through the air like a knife. "What has your past ever done for us?" The crowd held its breath, caught between the tugging traumas of the past and the flickering hope beckoning towards the future. This moment, I realized, was critical. We needed voices to bridge those gaps deepened by misunderstandings. "Every ounce of pain I've endured has led me to this moment," she replied, undaunted by his aggression, her gaze unwavering. "And what I carry, I pass on to each of you. When I say I have felt these wounds, it is because they are shared among us, shaping the very fabric of our community." And then, she pointed towards the little girl still standing with her flimsy sign, emitting a necessary innocence that seemed to echo the woman's world-weary truths. "Young one, you dare to remind us of the simplicity we often overlook, the beauty in unity." As if choreographed, the crowd began to react, a slow wave of emotion carrying through the air. I felt the energy shift. Hope, once buried beneath layers of rage and discontent, began to pulse like a heartbeat. Eyes that had been hardening softened, fists unclenched. Yet the underlying tension still simmered, threatening to boil over at any moment. Suddenly, I heard a soft whimper emanating from behind me. Turning, I spotted an older man hunched over, his face creased with worry and tears. He was clenching a crumpled photograph in his hand, and my chest pinched, realizing that perhaps he was navigating a pain far deeper than most, a personal loss spurred by this chaotic reality. I hesitated, the impulse to reach out battling against the enormity of the situation. But before I could bridge that gap, the man surged forward once more, anger saturating his words. "You think voicing these platitudes will change anything? You stand there preaching unity while dismissing our struggles as mere stories." "I'm not dismissing," the silver-haired woman rebuffed passionately. "I share to illuminate the scars we all bear. You are seen, and it's time we listen." The older man blinked back tears of rage and sorrow. "Then give me something real. Show me these ideals are more than just words." Simi, standing resolutely beside me, leaned in and whispered urgently, "Scott, we have to do something. If we let this spiral any further, we risk losing everything we've built here." I felt the weight of her plea pour into my chest, mingling with an emerging sense of purpose. Looking around the crowd, I could see others wrestling with similar revelations. And then, as though possessed by an unseen force, I took a step forward, my pulse buzzing with urgency and fear, yet compelled to change the tide. "What if we created a space for stories?" I called out, my voice breaking through the discord. "A moment to share the heavy burdens we've all carried? To truly hear one another." It felt as though the world stopped as silence hung in the air, anticipation swelling with unspoken resistance. I barely noticed the man's seething expression, I could only see the inklings of hope gathering, even among those who felt lost. But then, in that heartbeat of vulnerability, I felt the body of the crowd shift beneath us. Simi's grip went slack, her face pale, while the little girl stumbled back, an unexpected gasp leaving her lips as if she had seen a ghost. "What's wrong?" I asked, turning to her, unease prickling at the nape of my neck. The girl pointed up, and as I followed her gaze, horror gripped my heart. A crack in the sky seemed to widen, revealing an unsettling brightness underneath, a crescendo of light morphing into a silhouette. "Something is coming," she whispered, her voice trembling. In that instant, uncertainty washed over the crowd as we stood frozen, waiting for whatever revelations awaited us, teetering on the edge of shattering through the wall we had built might just be ready to crumble. The whispers of the crowd morphed into a cacophony of confusion as heads turned upward, drawing triumphant smiles into cautious frowns. I glanced at Simi, whose eyes sparkled with the remnants of hope but were clouded now with fear. The little girl clutched her sign tighter, the words "We are one" barely visible through her trembling fingers. "What do you see?" I urged the girl, stepping closer, desperate for clarity amidst the chaos. A soft whimper escaped her lips as she shook her head. "I don't know, the ground beneath us trembled slightly, causing people to sway, half reaching for stability, half rooted in an instinctual urge to flee." The expression on the silver-haired woman's face twisted into one of determination as she stepped forward again, grounding us in the moment. "We mustn't let fear dictate our actions," she called. "We hold power in our unity. That light could be a challenge or an opportunity. Which will we embrace?" The man, still pulsating with anger, sneered at her. "Opportunity? What opportunity can exist amidst danger? You're living in a fairy tale." Yet, there was a pause in his animosity, a flicker of curiosity dancing just below the surface. Around us, murmurs rose and fell with waves of uncertainty. I felt burdened by the weight of decision. There was something critical at hand, a choice that seemed to hold the power to shape everything we knew. "Maybe," I offered tentatively, "if we share our stories now, we can draw strength from each other before whatever is coming arrives." "Sharing stories?" he scoffed. "That's just as useful as gazing into the light. What do you even know about struggle?" The question cut deep, like a blade finding the softest flesh. I felt all eyes press upon me, expecting an answer, daring me to bring forth my own Pina testament to the struggle I'd faced. My breath quickened, an invisible weight pulled against my defenses, and then, as might happen in dreams, a memory flooded over me, sudden and vivid. My father's faded voice echoed in my mind, urging me to be brave. Suddenly, the time-worn trauma of watching my family fracture under the weight of hurt echoed within me, igniting a flame. "Maybe I don't know your specific pain," I said, the words pouring from my heart. "But I know what it is to feel powerless, to stand by as your family is torn apart, to wonder what the next day will bring. I'm here because I believe." My chest tightened as I continued, "that our collective pain can forge something greater if we dare to face it together." As I spoke, I could feel the stitch of connection weaving through the crowd. The silver-haired woman nodded, her eyes reflecting understanding, while those around me shifted back, restoring a glimpse of hope into their gazes. The older man's hardened expression softened under the weight of my words, the tension in his frame loosening. I saw him blink away tears, and I dared to hope perhaps this moment could build a fragile bridge toward understanding. Yet, before anything further could unfold, the thunderous crack echoed through the air, shaking the ground beneath us, as if a great beast were stirring from a long slumber. The silhouette in the sky transformed, warping into several figures, ethereal and overwhelming. Fear dripped into the air like rain, mingling with resolve, as echoes of gasps and cries crested like waves. The light pulsed with an inexplicable energy, shimmering in layers that revealed fleeting images of past struggles, mingled with glimpses of futures both bright and shrouded in darkness. "Whatever comes, we have to stand together," the silver-haired woman shouted, her voice rising above the chaos. "We can face this." Instinctively, I grasped Simi's hand tighter, the heat of her pulse racing against my palm melding with my racing heart. My thoughts raced, and confusion bloomed with alarming speed. It was not just a matter of facing the unknown outside but the conflicts within that might prove equally challenging. Suddenly, above the flickers of light and shadow, a single sound pierced through, like the high, childlike giggle of the little girl. That innocence wrapped itself around me like a warm embrace, diffusing tension in a moment, just long enough for us to breathe. "Look," she said again, her voice laced with wonder and fear. "It's beautiful, too." I followed her gaze, and for a fleeting second, the looming dread transformed, revealing stunning colors spiraling through the sky, painting it into a breathtaking canvas of both beauty and terror. But among that splendor, something about the shadows lingered an unsettling riddance that whispered secrets yet unspoken. Then, as if she were a medium carrying a message from those who had always believed in us, she squeezed my hand. "Are we all still here?" Her innocent question sparked something deep within me. The crowd, with their shared struggles, was indeed here, entangled in a moment that demanded more than mere confrontation of fear. It called for an unveiling of strength we had yet to grasp. Yet before I could respond, a voice rang out from the edges of the crowd, startling all of us. "If you want unity, there are sacrifices to be made." The conviction in the words shattered the uncertainty as realization washed over meth. Truth in the last remnants of defeat mingled with an unexpected courage rising inside. I turned to see who had spoken, my heart racing, grasping every piece of the unknown that lay ahead, both terrified and hopeful, and although I couldn't yet comprehend the implications of those words, I felt a shiver, something monumental unfurling like the pages of a long-forgotten tome, ready to share secrets from the depths we had all hesitantly guarded. Time stopped as I gripped Simi's hand tighter, ready to face whatever awaited us. The luminous tapestry of colors began to fade, replaced by a suffocating pallor that crept over the crowd as dread settled heavier in our hearts. My grip on Simi's hand tightened, her small form trembled slightly, brimming with confusion as she stared at the emerging figures. Their forms twisted as if wrestling with the very air itself, and I could feel the palpable energy swirling around us, pushing at the edges of our unified resolve. The man's voice rang out again, now laced with an uneasy fervor. "Sacrifices? What kind of sacrifices? Until now, we've given everything." His desperation ignited a ripple of fear through the crowd, sowing seeds of doubt where hope had briefly flourished just moments before. Across from us, the silver-haired woman lifted her chin, a flicker of defiance igniting in her gaze. "We navigate this together. Fear hinders while love empowers. We need to choose who we will be in this moment." Her words danced, filled with an urgency that beckoned our hearts to align. As the figures in the sky shifted, revealing glimpses of our history, failures, heartaches, and moments of grace realized through the pine, it was almost as if each shadow carried a silent plea. With every flickering memory invoked, I felt our collective experiences echo between us, straining against the weight of isolation that often framed our lives. "Why, Dad?" Simi whispered, pulling my attention back to her as tears brimmed in her eyes. "He said sacrifices were like trees growing strong and deep roots, but sometimes it meant losing parts of yourself." I crouched down to meet her gaze, seeing in her a reflection of my own confusion, my own questions about what stood behind those words. "Do you think he meant we have to give up something important?" Worry gnawed at my insides, fearing the answer. Before Simi could respond, the laughter of a child broke through the tension, again a soft, lilting sound that radiated courage amid the uncertainty. Heads turned as a little boy emerged from behind the crowd, his face stained with dirt but his smile vivid and bright, untouched by the shadows that clawed at our edges. "I don't want to be scared," he shouted, voice clear as a bell. "I just want that." He pointed toward a vibrant shimmer peeking at the edges of the flickering silhouettes, the tantalizing promise of hope within the encroaching gloom. In that moment, the crowd's breathing eased just slightly, as if the boy's boldness carved a path through layers of fear, revealing a sliver of light. I caught the silver-haired woman's eye, and a silent understanding passed between us, a reminder that in moments of vulnerability, the purest voices often lead the way. "It's true," I voiced, my own courage swelling as I stood taller. "None of us want fear to govern our hearts. This might not just be a spectacle of dread, but also a chance to reclaim our stories." As if summoned by our collective energy, the ethereal figures twirled in response to our hope, shifting once more, and formed an intricate design that began to mirror the very unity we sought. It was raw and chaotic, but it felt like a promise unfolding. I could feel the pulse of the moment swelling as it beckoned us to embrace whatever lay ahead with our hearts open. But then, a loud crack of thunder echoed above us, drowning out the whispers of encouragement. The vibrant design fractured, scattering like leaves caught in a storm, a shattering consequence for anything we may have entertained. "What just happened?" Simi's small voice trembled, and I felt her energy dim, grasping at the remnants of that light which now fled our reach. The older man, whose anger was momentarily quelled, raised his hand to shield his eyes from the shimmering chaos now threatening to spiral beyond our understanding. This is what awaits USA test. Can we endure? Just as despair threatened to latch onto our hearts again, I looked at the silver-haired woman. Her eyes found mine, and in that gaze, I witnessed the flicker of possibility. It is not enough to endure. We must also choose to believe. We must look for the light even when it vanishes. As the air thickened with tension, and shadows danced menacingly close, I turned back to Simi and the others around us, the pulse of hope swelling within me. Even if we wade deeper into the unknown, we have to try. Not just for ourselves, but for each other. More whispers of agreement began to ripple through the crowd, entangling with my resolve, crafting a fragile web that urged us backward from despair. But just as it felt as if we were reclaiming that ground, a new voice soared high above us, an unfamiliar tone that shattered the moment. You think you're ready? The tone dripped with disdain. Then welcome to the reckoning. Every choice has a cost. You will find out soon enough. My heart plunged into my stomach, struggling to keep pace with the roller coaster of emotions lighting within me. Each heartbeat echoed its own fear. Who was this voice, and what trials awaited us? And before I could even grasp Simi's hand to provide comfort, the ground rippled ominously beneath us, a tremor that echoed through the air, stirring the darkness like a beast awakening from slumber. The sacrifice loomed nearer, dark and inevitable, waiting to test us in ways we had yet to fathom, while the vibrant light throbbed just out of reach, teasing the possibility of hope amidst the encroaching chaos. In that tense moment, I felt the story still unwritten unfurl within me, a promise lingering on the precipice of uncertainty. Together, we would confront whatever was to come, even if everything we knew and everything we loved would be changed irrevocably. The storm had subsided, leaving behind an unsettling calm that settled like dust across the crowd. As we stood together, Simi, the silver-haired woman, the little girl, and the growing mass of face, an unspoken connection threaded us together, each heartbeat echoing a collective fear and resolve that pulsated through my veins. Are we ready? I asked, my voice quaking as the words spilled forth, an earnest plea for our fate to intertwine with courage rather than fear. The air thickened with anticipation. It seemed the storm had given way to something more perilous, a reckoning that would demand sacrifices we could scarcely comprehend. We must stand as one, Simi said, her voice steady despite the tremors that coursed through her slender frame. I turned to her, seeing the determination etched on her face, reflecting the flickering hope we had ignited earlier. The small girl beside her gripped her flimsy sign, the words "We are one" barely visible, yet their significance felt monumental, emboldening our collective eyes, directing us back toward whatever light remained. I don't want to lose hope, I admitted, my voice barely above a whisper. What if we can't overcome this? What if the cost is too high? Hope isn't linear, Scott, Simi replied softly, yet firm. It grows in moments like Theseus, the darkness. I saw it then, the truth shimmering in her words, the seeds of resilience sown in the face of despair. I took a breath, allowing myself to absorb her light, and stepped back into place, surrounded by those who stood resolute in this moment. The onlookers appeared restless, anxiety swirling among them like leaves caught in an autumn wind, yet there was an undercurrent of strength rising through the uncertainty. The silver-haired woman, now radiating the fierce energy of a sentinel, raised her arms. Together, friends. We have a voice, let it rise above the roar. Whatever tests may come, let us face them together. Her declaration echoed through the air, igniting a flame deep in the chest of each listener. I felt something within me unfurl, the weight of doubt lifting incrementally as I looked around the sea of faces, each distinct, yet somehow familiarly intertwined in their shared stories of struggle. As those voices coalesced into a single resonant call, a wave moved through the crowd, sweeping toward the figures hovering above. The shadows rippled as if restless with the resurgence of our spirit, vibrating against the promise we had just sparked. Shout your truths. Someone called from the back of the crowd, encouragement roaring like thunder that mirrored the sky. Others joined in, rising to the moment, each voice threading into the tapestry, each story shared igniting further embers of hope among the chaos. And just as we reached that fervor, the thunder overhead cracked sharply, elevating the tension to an unbearable pitch. the ethereal figures above morphed, shifting like shadows dancing playfully amidst the building storm, a kaleidoscope of colors weaving together the fabric of our lives and struggles. It felt as if they reflected our deepest anxieties and our most profound hopes, the light twinkling within to represent the beauty formed through even the darkest of moments. Just a bit closer, the silver-haired woman called out, urging us forward. Don't let fear shackle your voice. Her words echoed, pulling at the barricades that had historically held us apart, each participant binding tighter with the force of unity. But there, amid the euphoria of reclaiming our voices, a ripple of dread washed over me. What if this collective emergence would lead to betrayal? What if the sacrifice demanded would be irreparable? My heart raced, and I hesitated, torn between fear and the push of an inevitable force, and then I heard Simi's voice cut through the chaos. We are more than we know. We carry the weight of love, pain, loss, transforming it into something beautiful that nobody can shatter. Her plea hung in the air, and I could feel the tension shift, the darkness swirling around us beginning to retreat. Well, find that beauty, I shouted, my own spirit breaking through as I joined her words, freely pouring as if awakened from deep slumber, igniting a fire within me that I had hidden. Well, forge connections, together, and we will not let them drown our voices. The crowd roared with renewed vigor, each outcry rippling into a harmonious chain that radiated our resilience back to the figures, whose shifting forms hesitated momentarily, caught off guard by the collective force of our love and defiance. But just as the balance began to tip in our favor, the malevolent voice thundered again, reverberating through the fabric of the gathering storm. Unity can be a weapon, a tool of manipulation. Will you sacrifice yourselves for a fleeting illusion? The crowd wavered, uncertainty creeping back into their hearts like a thief in the dark. I felt Simi's hand slip, and the tug of fear threatened to drown the embers we had ignited. No! I cried, throwing my voice into the tempest. Fear is a choice, but hope is our birthright. We must own it, embrace one another. The little girl stepped forward, standing valiantly at the forefront, and I was astounded by her courage. I'm scared, but I know we can find light together. She lifted her sign high beneath the ominous whirl of shadow, a small beacon amidst the tempest, and then, something unexpected happened. As the color in the sky surged in reaction to her words, the shadows morphed, converging into ethereal figures resembling those lost in the labyrinth of silence forever. The air became electric, an energy surging through our veins, a moment that seemed to hold both dread and promise in the balance. Stay true to your hearts, the silver-haired woman urged, losing herself in the moment. Draw strength from your history, it is part of what makes you whole. With a gasp, glimmers of hope reeled through like shooting stars, a reminder that even through pain there exists the potential for beauty to emerge. Remember, I began, stepping closer to Simi, squeezing her hand firmly, the sacrifice doesn't always have to be destructive. Sometimes, giving ourselves will reward us far more. Hope blossomed in the crowd, and together we honed our focus on the figures above, voices unwavering in unison, an unwavering reminder that we were a tapestry woven together through love. Through the energy we sent forth, I could sense new threads shimmering, delicate yet strong, weaving a bond strong enough to weather the storm that we faced. The figures, regardless of their reservations, anchoring ourselves to that newfound truth of sacrifice, unfurling, coming face to face with the understanding that the price we pay for connection would pale in comparison to the beauty it could blossom into. And so, we climbed together through that veil, pulling toward the light, fusing hope into every heartbeat and breath. The storm delivered its final growl, a crashing tempest around us that slowly morphed into an embrace. Amidst the turmoil, we found our truth, and as one, we shouted it into the sky, stomping our feet and moving as one. We chose to rise, together in that moment, not just for ourselves, but for every shadowed voice yearning for the warmth of acceptance. And in the heart of that storm, we glimpsed a light, a profound, unwavering spirit of possibility that existed beyond fear. Those shadows receded, and we wrapped our stories into the very fabric of the air before us, forever sealing that moment in memory. As the tumult began to quiet, and the figures shifted to reveal a glimmer of connection deep within, I realized that whatever had awaited beyond was no longer a threat we would face alone. I turned to Simi, a whisper of victory hanging in the air between us. We did it, she breathed, a smile blossoming on her face, a reflection of the illumination within her heart. Yes, I replied softly, the words suffused with an energy that felt lighter, lifting the burdens that had once threatened to drown us. Together, we are unstoppable. And as the daylight broke through the cloud, I felt unyielding faith emanating from our collective stories, like a gentle two-cha promise that we would walk forward, holding on to that hope, irrevocably changed but eternally bound by the love we shared. In that illusion formed through darkness, I finally understood, light and shadow walk hand in hand, dancing their eternal dance. And in embracing both, we had begun to weave a future that resonated with hope, a resonance that would remind us, even the most tumultuous storms could only serve to strengthen us in our journey home. Together, we stepped forward, and in doing so, we shattered the silence woven through fear, reborn in the light we had created. We are one. Rang the refrain, travel-weary and tender, trembling with promises anew. A heartbeat echoed into the horizon, a final line that resonated deep within me, leaving me profoundly moved.